Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Duoplane podcast, Navigating E-commerce Skies, where we take a deep dive into the ever-evolving world of e-commerce. Today on our show, we have Alavi, who is the owner of Seed to Sold. Seed to Sold develops and markets brands and products in the cannabis space, such as Dank Geek, LA Pipes, and more. Ali has a very interesting background. He was born in Iran, fled to Turkey, and is now a resident of LA. He started working in sales at age 13 and moved to the film industry at 19. He started production companies and an e-commerce tech company called UPC, which he sold. And after some time at Cast and Crew as a senior PM, he took a year break to focus on Seed to Sold. So today we're going to be discussing lots of different things. We're going to focus on entrepreneurship and product management. Ali contributes his success through applying product management and development principles to his website and e-commerce software. He believes that applying these principles to your e-commerce business will translate into a better product and real-world results for your customers and ultimately your revenue. Welcome, Ali.
Hey, how's it going, Mandy?
Pretty good. How are you today?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for asking.
Good. I'm really excited to jump in. We have tons of different clients that are in the cannabis space. I used to actually be in it myself. I don't think I told you this, but I started an on-demand cannabis delivery company as one of the first in Canada. And this is kind of when Canada legalized cannabis for the first time. So it was a really interesting and exciting time. So I'm excited to learn more about you and your businesses.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've actually done some work in the cannabis space in Canada as well. So it's interesting coincidence there.
Awesome. So yeah, I'd love to just jump into your background. I find it super interesting how you relate so much of your past experiences and even your childhood to what you do today. So you told me that you grew up in war, learned that giving up was never an option. It seems like you developed a lot of, resistance and perseverance through your childhood experiences. So I'd love to, hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely take a lot from my personal experiences, and I feel that oftentimes we tend to overlook those personal experiences and look towards, up and coming best practices or frameworks as the way to solve problems. But I think that a lot of those are predicated on experiences that have been had. Personally, myself, again, as you mentioned, I was born in Iran. It's interesting because the culture in Iran has actually informed a lot of my product management as well. And we'll get into that a little bit. It's a culture of hospitality and accommodation and kind of anticipating the needs of your guests. And that kind of really applies to, customers you're bringing into your store or customers you're building a particular software for. After fleeing the war in Iran, we went into Turkey. From Turkey, we got refugee status to come into the US, and we landed in Los Angeles. I definitely took an early interest in computers. This was the 90s. It was kind of the birth of computers, pre-internet even. And at the same time, I had an interest in the creative arts, photography, and film. So my career has kind of been at the intersection of computers, software technology, and entertainment. Later on in my career, I got into sales. I always had my father owned businesses, and he was an entrepreneur. And so my interest in business and sales was also there. Again, as you mentioned, I started at the age of 13 doing door-to-door sales, and I'll kind of use that as an example because it's interesting as well. When you think you're actually selling one particular product, there's actually an underlying product that you may be selling that is even more relevant than the object that's exchanging hands. That was very much the case with my door-to-door sales experience, which I'll kind of get into as we get into the elements of product and how it applies to sales and e-commerce. From there, I started a web development company at the age of 17. We were building websites for companies in the entertainment industry and in real estate. We're talking dial-up days, so it was a long time ago. It was kind of the beginning of it. We were digitizing, one of the first to ever encode video for the web. Then again, was an emerging industry that really was just starting to kind of take hold because you really couldn't transfer large amounts of data over the web. From there, I had companies, and again, looking at my background, I went into special effects, developing software for the special effects industry, doing nonlinear digital post-production, eventually moving on into production. Again, I relate a lot of what I did in entertainment back to commerce. So much of it is, again, kind of anticipating what your audience expects, what they want to see, and seeing how you can work around those expectations to either delight them or make them feel kind of a sense of comfort in that what they were expecting is going to happen. I went into e-commerce. I had a company, UPC, where we were started as manufacturing products in the cannabis space. But what I was doing is taking my tech background and my computer science background and applying it to the development of those products in the cannabis space. At that point in time, at the kind of the emergence of legalization, technology wasn't really being utilized. Decisions were kind of made with gut feelings. And so we were using data to determine what markets to kind of go after at what particular points in time, what products would be best suited to particular markets, and when to kind of market those products and how to market them. Again, we were kind of the first in the SEO in the cannabis space. So a company that I sold one of my companies to, Smoke Cartel, is the highest ranked across any keyword in the cannabis space to this day. Company has now gone public, is actually owned by a Canadian company called High Tide. And they've bought everybody else essentially in the business since then. From there, I wanted to kind of, had an entrepreneurial background. I'd step in and out of roles working for other companies in addition to my own, but I wanted to kind of get into the mainstream software development side and work for a bigger corporation. That's where I went into Cast and Crew. Cast and Crew developed software for the film industry. And again, lots of my experiences and things that I had learned, I applied in developing software there. And yeah, Seed to Sold was kind of along for the ride through many of this. It was a company that was consulting and developing technology and software and products for the companies I was working with, kind of under the radar because the relationships that I had with the companies were keeping my plate pretty full. And it's still the case to this day with Seed to Sold. About a year ago, I decided to kind of put all of my attention to Seed to Sold, really work with companies to kind of help them bring best product management experiences into their cannabis companies and into even developing their physical products as well. And yeah, we use Duoplane all the time in the websites that I have to integrate the sites with each other, and it's been a tremendous help for us as well. So thank you guys for that. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. I find it really interesting how you brought up, technology in the cannabis space, because for me, my background is in software. I've always started software companies. And so that's like when I started my company, which was, on-demand cannabis delivery, I kind of realized how archaic the industry was, and I think that's why we found such success in it, is because we were the first company in Canada at that time where you could go onto an app, order your products, track your driver. Like, it was an Uber experience, which no one in Canada had seen. Obviously, in the States, there's Ease and tons of other companies that do that. But it was quite archaic, especially in Canada, I guess. But I think just across the board, where a lot of times you still were, texting or making that phone call, as opposed to these companies utilizing technology to their advantage. So, I mean, I guess my question to you would be, is that what you kind of saw, was that, there was this space kind of in the market to use technology in the cannabis space to your advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. To 2 points, two of the points that you mentioned are kind of interesting. One is absolutely the lack of technology to a certain extent. And I think that lots of the people in this industry came from the smoke shop business. It's a very hands-on, buy cheap, sell expensive, and that's pretty much it. And if you've gone into too many smoke shops, the customer experience tends to be lacking as well. And so service isn't a big part of the experience. Even more so, to the other point, companies like Ease and some of the other companies out here in California and across the States now that are consider themselves a tech company, and they're involved in the cannabis space, their own technology, in my opinion, could be much better informed and function and be a lot more user-friendly and solve the user problems in a much, much, much better way than they currently do. And some of the bigger companies, like, for example, Weed Maps, and lots of the other ones, I think that if you're familiar with the application, there's definitely areas where they're a tech company, but they're really, I don't feel, are applying the best of these particular practices that could really take their user experience to the next level.
Definitely. And you brought up another good point too, where I think what's lacking in the cannabis space is sort of that like customer experience too. You're used to texting or calling and then being like, yep, I'll meet up with you. Whereas like we really focused on giving like really, really great support and a great experience. And I think that like even something as simple as like having live chat and giving, sending emojis like thumbs up and like smiley faces and stuff, like seemed like it was just a new experience for people who are used to, buying and spending money in this space. And I think that's what kept them coming back. It wasn't just the technology aspect of it, where wow, I can see my driver coming to me with my cannabis, but it was also the fact of like, holy crap, I just got like such a good experience for the first time in this space where like they really care about the customer.
Yeah, exactly. Technology for the sake of technology really doesn't do much, in my opinion. I think that the technology needs to solve some particular problem better than a human or a traditional method could. Oftentimes with these newer cannabis companies that are, consider themselves technology companies, they've got all the latest tech stack, they've got all the bells and whistles, they've got all the key titles in place, but still the user experience is lacking, the service is lacking. At the end of the day, as a user, if my problem isn't being solved the most optimal way with the best expected experience, then you're not, all the technology in the world isn't going to make a difference. I think that for us, to an earlier point you made, yes, we use the technology not only to inform the business decisions we were making internally in terms of the products we're going to make, when we're going to make them, when we're going to market them, how and when we're going to market them. It was more so, how can we leverage this technology to provide a better user and customer experience, like you mentioned, whether it's chat or whether it's just having a more kind of a human response with those emojis that you mentioned. It's just something that simple. It conveys emotion, and we are emotional beings, and we need to feel that sense of validation that if I'm feeling upset or unhappy, you are feeling upset and unhappy with me. And if you're not able to convey that, and sometimes technology, a generic pre-written template email that gets sent when I sent my request in, isn't really going to give me that sense. So how can we cross that gap? And I think that as technology progresses over time, it's going to be more and more the key differentiator isn't going to be who's the fastest or who's got the latest, fanciest looking website, is really who's providing the better user experience, who's providing the better customer experience.
Yeah, definitely. I actually had a conversation recently with someone who owns an e-commerce agency, and he talked really deeply on this about how like the customer and how you deal with the customer and your experience with them is truly all that matters. And that's what's going to differentiate you. Whether if someone were to build the same website, have the exact same products, absolutely everything was literally, a duplicate, but you had the better customer experience, like they're going to come with you, even if the other company had cheaper pricing or something like that. Like it's something that really makes you stand out. And I know with us, like we talk about this all the time, how we refuse to use templates for like, whether it's, business leads coming in or we're dealing with any support that we have to deal with current clients, anything like that. Like we refuse to use templates. We always make sure there's a personal touch on it, because we do think that's what makes us stand out. And we hear it about competitors all the time, is they go to competitors and they're getting this templated responses, and they're like, well, this isn't actually answering my question. And it turns into quite a frustrating experience. And so I truly believe in, having that personal touch in business. And, even when you get to a certain point where you're big enough that you have, tons of clients where it becomes difficult to do that, I think it's better to invest your money into having more people to continue providing that than to even necessarily put it into technology to automate it.
Yeah, 100%. I experienced that firsthand with my first company. It was in the cannabis space. We were dealing and competing with a lot of people that were just kind of lowering their prices as much as they could. They had bigger selections. Perhaps they had more manpower so they could ship more quickly. And it was a quick race to the bottom in terms of trying to match pricing. And as we lowered our prices, we anticipated an increase in sales. That 100% did not occur. When we kind of reset, and with the new company that I set up after selling that particular company, we actually have been raising our prices, which is, it's what happens with inflation. Sure, we have more input, we have more costs going in, so we need to raise our prices. But as we've increased our prices, we've actually seen sales increase as well. We've taken those increase in prices and used those additional resources we have to provide that better customer service, especially in the cannabis space. With so many companies offering a very similar product, a very similar experience, trying to compete on price is a race to the bottom, and everyone's going to lose. And so, in fact, I think it's better to hold on to your prices, not give a signal that that is what you're competing on, and really compete on the customer service aspect of it, and leverage technology to do that. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in terms of a human being giving some particular response. Sure, that's one aspect of it. Is to, when we build our websites, when we build the funnels, as they call them. The step one first, you're searching for a particular product, search. Moving on to the next step, you have a desire, then you search for that particular product. Once you search, then you find it. Now are you getting all the information that you want? So as you get through those stages, you've got the landing page of the website or the landing page of that particular product. Now you're there. What kind of experience are you going to provide? I'm buying a product in the physical store. I have the option to pick it up, look at it from all different angles. Well, you go to most stores in the cannabis space, it's one really low quality photo. I can hardly see what I'm buying. What we do is we have 360 shots, way more photographs than other websites do. And we pay for that, but it translates to the user getting that same experience that they have in the store. It's like picking up the product and looking at it. So I think that the customer service should be informing the designs of each of those steps in the funnel. What I'm searching for, I think lots of people are using AI to write product descriptions. And so therefore you get the sensational, this is going to take your game to the next level. Well, what does that really mean? Again, as a buyer, are you providing me all the information, all the different tidbits I need to make the most informed decision about that particular purchase? And then as you're going to go down that funnel, I added it to my cart, et cetera, to the end of that funnel. Each step is another opportunity to kind of take, user experience and customer service and weave it in. And I think, again, that's where product management comes in. And I think somebody who's got good product management chops can really, and cares about the customer, can really kind of bring that into each step of the user's experience with the technology and with the people underneath as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you can tell that you're passionate about this side of it. And I think, passion when it comes to customer experience is what translates to success. And I'm sure that's definitely one of the key factors in that. But you brought up again, product management. So I kind of want to dive into that and start with the basics. Can you explain to anyone listening, what is product management? And also maybe give us a little bit of your personal angle on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you're probably going to get a variety of different answers to that particular question. What is product management? People think it's project management. Yeah, that's some aspects of it. It could be essentially, I'll kind of give the industry definition and kind of what I think is the most important aspect of the job. As a product manager, you're working with a team of designers and developers. Your job and stakeholders, those are people that have an interest, whether they be the users or whether they be the executives of the company that have an interest to seeing something get built. You're supposed to determine what you're supposed to build and when you're supposed to build that thing. And what you build is supposed to satisfy some particular user need. You're working with the users to figure out what their needs are. You're working with the business. You're working with the designers to design some solution. You're working with the developers to develop a solution. And you're working with the business owners, the internal stakeholders, the business stakeholders, to figure out how much you're going to spend, when you're going to release, those kinds of things. Those are kind of day-to-day logistics of the job. But I think what the most important, and to me, I consider those output. Busy work, creating, written descriptions and documentation, etc. That I consider output. What I think is more important, outcome. What kind of value are you getting? What are you actually building? At the end of the day, in my opinion, the job of the product manager is to really identify the most critical user needs that are needed to be solved for a particular problem. For example, there's a great author, Clayton Christensen, from Harvard, that has written quite extensively about product development, and not necessarily product management. And I use a lot of his kind of frameworks and ideas when I'm building product. It's that, what problem are you trying to solve? Every time I come to a website or I use a particular product, I'm using it to solve a particular problem. I pick up a screwdriver, it's because I need to screw in some particular type of screw. But that could be a flathead and I've got a Phillips. That's not going to work. So again, that tool is the website, or let's say in this particular case, and me needing to screw in that screw is the problem I'm trying to solve. Clayton Christensen uses the example of, a milkshake. You think that you're buying a milkshake, simple. I want a milkshake. That's it. That's a problem. Problem is, I want a milkshake. The store is supposed to sell me a milkshake. And they did extensive studies on this, and they actually found out that no, like this group that buys milkshake in the morning, for example, is buying it because they want something that's going to sustain them throughout the day. They want something that they can sip very slowly in their car as they're driving down the road. So in fact, they're not solving a desire and a need for wanting something sweet like a milkshake. They're solving a need to quench an appetite, to solve boredom in traffic. And so that informs the viscosity of that milkshake. Well, maybe you don't want it to be too watery, so that it takes a long time for somebody to drink it. Versus the milkshake that people are buying in the afternoon, they're actually buying it for their children. Those children have a completely different problem they're trying to solve. They're not sitting in traffic and going to work and just want some energy. They want something just really sweet. And parents don't want to sit there and have their kids drink that milkshake over the next 3 hours. So that milkshake viscosity needs to be such that that child can drink it quickly. So something as simple as a milkshake is actually solving two completely different problems. So at the heart of product management, you have to figure out what that problem is that the user is trying to solve. And oftentimes, it's not as clear cut as you would think. Another good example I'll kind of throw out there is in my own experience. When I started doing door-to-door sales, I was 13. I think it was quite illegal what this company was doing, but they would pick us up in a minivan and drive us around in kind of somewhat shady neighborhoods sometime and give us a basket full of all kinds of random stuff. And you could tell it was just stuff they had bought really cheaply. There'd be old chunky candles in there, expired, caramel turtles and crowns and tea bags, all kinds of random stuff. And each one of them, the minimum price I think was $20 or $30, where somebody could go into a store, buy any one of those things for $3 to $5. But what we were selling were not a bag of tea bags or a box of chocolates. We had a whole shtick. We would go up and we had to tell a story about how we're, young youth and, we're troubled and we're supposed to stay off the streets. This is helping us stay off the streets. And if I sell more than my competitors, then I'm going to get a free trip to Disneyland. They had a whole shtick they had written for us, and it actually worked brilliantly because the person in that house was no longer buying that box of chocolates. They were satisfying the need to want to help a young person who was trying to do well for themselves. So that's what I was selling. I wasn't trying to convince them that this is the best box of chocolates they were buying. As a matter of fact, they were the worst expired, terrible chocolates you'd ever had. They were going to be very disappointed when they opened them, but they could feel good that they helped me out. So again, there's a very perfect example. You think you're selling chocolates, you're selling human connection, you're selling a desire to want to help somebody. And that's what we're selling. It's the same thing in product management. Find that underlying need and find the best way to solve it. The rest of it is busy work. It's project management, essentially.
I actually really, really like that. And I have heard that milkshake example before. So it was cool hearing it again because it's been a while. But I like your take on this. I think it's really interesting and I think it's really true. I'd love to hear, how do you think that the role of a PM in e-commerce is different than a PM building other types of software?
It's a good question. I really don't think it's very much different. I think that different companies and different industries and different organizations may look at it differently, but from my perspective, I think they're one and the same. And I'll go even further back. I think that, again, using my own background, and I think that why people's personal backgrounds, I think, are important when you're determining the product manager to put into a particular position. Because obviously for different products, there might be slightly different skill sets that are needed, but oftentimes when you're looking at product managers, there's a particular set of qualities and questions that are asked to them, and often the background is just kind of an ancillary. What that does, it creates a whole group of folks that all kind of are very like-minded, and that creates monotony, and that doesn't create the diversity that really creates, makes for robust, interesting, clever solutions. Now, in my own experience, like in Iran growing up, we are known, and we have this entire language even around this, for being very, very hospitable to our guests. If you go to a Persian person's house, you're going to leave just obese and full, and you're going to have 50 cups of tea. They're not going to let you leave. They're going to stuff your pockets full of food on the way out. And when you think you're going over just for a cup of coffee, you're going to have a whole spread. And it's all about hospitality and anticipating needs and figuring out how to best deliver the optimal experience to that person who's coming over just for an afternoon, let's say. Now, taking that over into product, working in product at Castle or even other places, sure, you've got the busy work, you've got, it's all, does your presentation look good? Or, do you have all the data? And in my opinion, I think that that's going to be the job of AI, analyzing and looking at data. So I think that the human component is even more important now, as AI is really taking a significant role in product management and product development in general. At a company, if you're developing software, even if it's for the film industry, you're again supposed to anticipate what needs you're supposed to solve for. How can you best accommodate those needs? How can you anticipate those needs? How can you even look 4 or 5 steps ahead and maybe even anticipate needs that the user themselves hasn't even realized that they have? Again, I'm sure you've heard this. It's a common thing. If you ask, you never want to ask the user, well, what do you want? The answer is they don't really know what they want yet. It's your job to anticipate what they want. What problem are they trying to solve, and how are you going to provide that to them? Often what happens, though, at the companies that are just kind of very software focused, where the user is kind of in the background. In a company like Cast and Crew, you don't have millions of users. You don't have enough data to get really statistical significance there. And again, in my opinion, I don't think you need it for product management development. I think just enough to inform you or give you an inkling the direction you need to go is enough. But when the users are kind of far away, the internal voices kind of take hold. And often you end up with a product like, let's say, ADP. Everyone knows that software. It's the worst thing. Who would use ADP if they had a choice? It's payroll software, obviously, for those who aren't familiar with it. But that's just because the users aren't as important. It's that company that's using it. It's 4, 5, 10, 15, maybe 1,000 people. That's different in e-commerce. In e-commerce, your users and your customers are going to let you know when they're not happy. And there's a lot of them. You're going to have thousands and thousands of people interacting with your product on a daily basis. So you have a lot closer connection to that end user than you do in a company which is developing a software for others that's B2B, let's say, or even B2C, but very small user base. And that's the case. So I think at the heart of it, it's the same. You have users that are trying to solve a particular problem, and you're supposed to solve that problem for them the best way possible, the most efficient way possible. The significant difference is that in e-commerce, you have a lot more people who are going to tell you you're doing something wrong when you do something wrong. Where in software B2B or even B2C, where the consumer base is very small, and at Cast and Crew, we had B2B, but then you have production crew. There aren't millions of filmmakers, production crew out there. There's 10,000, 20, 30,000, so not that many. It's a lot harder to get that immediate feedback, and other voices in the room often take precedent. So I think there's the similarity there. Again, at the heart of it, we have to remember that it's about the user, and that often gets overlooked at bigger companies. But at e-commerce, we can't forget that. You forget that, you're going to go out of business. Somebody's going to go somewhere else. The customer is going to go elsewhere.
Definitely. Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. Is even when you were talking, I was like, the biggest difference is just B2B versus B2C, and the enormity of, hopefully, in e-commerce, the size of your customer base versus a B2B company. And I can also attest to Persian hospitality. I grew up with quite a few Persian friends, and I even this is actually recently, I had a friend say to me, like, did you grow up in, a household that wasn't like Caucasian or something? You're very hospitable. And I said, no, I just grew up going to a lot of like Persian friends' homes, because it is that you walk away with like tons of food, and you're kind of just like, they do so much for you, and it's such a great experience. And I think it's cool that you take, these experiences that you had as a child and how you grew up, even talking about your dad being an entrepreneur. I'm sure that's, part of the reason why you are as well. And
Sure.
It's interesting that these experiences that we have as children or even as teenagers can play such an important role in, starting a company, but then also how we run that company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's lots of frameworks and new lingo, and it's constantly evolving in product and in software and product development, agile, this, that, and it's the new lingo. But if you are a student of it and you go back far enough, and had some schooling, but I do a lot of my own studying. I love what I do in product management, software development in general, so I study a lot on it. You see that even books that were written 50, 60 years ago, at their heart, they're saying the same thing. We've just kind of changed the catchphrases and keywords. When you look at Agile, when you look at the various different frameworks that are used in product management, they're essentially distillations of earlier lessons that were taught sometimes even 100 years ago. So definitely using that and using our own experience, I think sometimes is undervalued, but I think it's tremendous. It can be tremendous, especially if you tie them and further inform them with what's kind of currently out there in terms of the latest and best practices. But the latest and best practices are always going to be one step behind. There's always some new latest and best practice. There's always a new, Harvard Business Review article that comes out and says, hey, you should do it like this and not like this. Or McKinsey writes something, do it like this versus do it like that. But plenty of successful companies have been around for hundreds of years when they didn't have our modern frameworks, and they've done quite well in solving user problems. So yeah, I definitely draw on my experiences, and I even draw on lessons of the past, even if they're not my own, for sure.
Definitely. At what point do you think that an e-commerce company should think about hiring a PM, or do you think that should be, part of the founder's role is just learning and becoming that for the first while?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question that I've actually struggled with myself. I've struggled as well in my own businesses. Of course, I have a product management background, but I have to wear a lot of different hats. There's a lot of things to do. It'd be really helpful if I had a dedicated product manager in some particular aspects. Obviously, cost is one thing. That's at the end. Product managers are expensive, like software developers, and so that's obviously a huge factor. But if you can afford one, I certainly think you should have one. The role of a CEO is often a modified version of a role of a product manager anyway. If you're an entrepreneur, whether or not you have the title of product manager or even know what a product manager is, you're often doing what a product manager does. So, when you hire a product manager, you've got to hire somebody who you trust running your business. They could either destroy the entire business or be a key part of its success. So it's a super, super, super critical role in that aspect, that they're going to determine essentially the success of your business, especially early on. Later on, if you have hundreds of employees, maybe a bad PM isn't going to really mess things up too bad. But if you've got just 4 or 5 employees and you're just starting out, somebody who's kind of blindly applying frameworks or just doesn't really, is just kind of understands the job, but really doesn't understand the crux of it, can really be damaging. I think that's important for all business owners to learn these things themselves. Lots of them could be applied. Lots of them they probably already know, but they just know it under a different name. They've probably been applying it, but maybe forgetting one part of the framework that wasn't in their repertoire. All of this information, thankfully, is very available, and it's easy to digest. It's not super complicated. And if you're a business owner, I highly recommend taking a product management course. Even there's courses offered. I've taken them myself from Boston University online, 6-month course, fantastic. I've been applying what I learned in that course, continue from that point forward. There's courses from Yale, there's courses from all the different online education programs, and there's even free ones from like LinkedIn, etc. So I think the first step is, if you can't afford a PM, if you're not at that stage, is learn it yourself, become informed yourself, and apply what you learn to your day-to-day, and you'll quickly realize you're a much better CEO, you're a much better business owner. And if you're at a place where you can afford one, then by all means. I mean, I think at the point where we would bring one in is where we have a team of developers, we have a team of designers, and we need somebody to kind of guide them in terms of what to build, how to build it, and when to build it. And so I think that's a decision that depends on the finances of the business and the size of the business, and really the skill set of the CEO. You may not have any technical background whatsoever. I don't think that's necessarily 100% required, but it's really, really good to have some technical knowledge. So I think those are all factors to weigh in and inform. But most important of all, just go out there and learn it. The information is there, fantastic. And you'll probably hire a better product manager when you do find one, or when you are ready for one, if you have an understanding of the job yourself.
I fully agree with everything you just said. I'd love to talk a little bit about the future of e-commerce. Like, how do you see the role of AI in product management and e-commerce? Just what do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we all know AI is a big talk right now. We leverage AI in our company. What we do, and I think that's going to have a significant role in the job of a product manager and in e-commerce in general. And that's what it's also going to do, in my opinion, is going back to our original point, is make service and caring for your users and working to best solve their problems even more critical, because the playing field, to a certain extent, on some fronts, it's going to be leveled. I'll tell you how we kind of use AI and kind of are anticipated going in the future. Obviously, we know at ChatGPT, we use it to write product descriptions. We use their APIs. When we have a new product, in the past, we would upload somebody's catalog. We do lots of drop shipping on one of our websites. We'd upload 6,000 to 7,000 products. Well, now we have to write product descriptions for all of them. It was a monumental task. It took a long, long time to do it. Now what we do is we hit a ChatGPT endpoint, an API endpoint. We give parameters for how it should write a particular product description. It's all automated. It's the second I add a particular tag to a listing in Shopify, ChatGPT picks it up and does the rest. It writes the product description. It writes bullet points. It writes a blog article that's related. It does a whole slew of things. And then sends that back to Shopify, and we use that as the product description. We stylize that information as it comes in, so we have proper tags all along the way. That's all done with AI. We can now write product descriptions that are as good as ones written by humans, more or less, for the majority of the part, unless it's a brand new product where information isn't available, obviously, in a weekend, where it might have taken us a year. So obviously that's huge. And so now I have a lot more searchable data than my competitor. If my competitor isn't using AI, I'm able to produce thousands and thousands of pages of content overnight, where my competitor might take months. And I know that Google says that they can detect the AI, but in reality, they really can't. I think they kind of have to say they can. We've tested it, and they can't. We can also rewrite and rephrase. You can use one AI to write the description. We use sometimes another AI to rewrite the original description, and that completely confounds the system. And at a certain point, you don't want humans wasting their time writing product descriptions. I would rather have my human using the brains to do other things that is very much human and unique to that particular person, things that they could do, making bigger decisions that I particularly wouldn't want AI to make. The other part with AI, besides product descriptions, image modifications, all of these things that were very time-consuming, sometimes expensive, especially if you're doing them stateside, AI will take over all that. Even in terms of recommending products to a customer, right? In terms of determining what products to market to what customers when to send out a particular email to a customer who maybe has had some particular browsing activity, looking at data and trying to glean some information from that data. I think that AI is going to take care of all of that. Analytics, data, data-centered product managers. I think that AI is going to really kind of come in and take some of that away. So what's left? The customer experience, the service design. When I come into your store, what do I experience first? What do I experience next? How are you going to make it so that I have all of the information I need to make a particular purchase decision? Once I've made that particular purchase decision, how are you going to nurture that relationship to make sure that I'm happy with that decision that I've made, and I continue to come back to you to make future purchases? AI may help a little bit there, but that's going to have to be a job of some particular product manager who's making, or a team, essentially, because product management is essentially one part of a team. All these decisions are made with a team. Product manager never should make a decision by themselves in a vacuum. It's informed and made with the team. It's those people that are in the room who've got their heads together, who are kind of having a discussion, who are kind of whiteboarding, who are going to make those decisions. And that's really going to be the key differentiator. All of the websites, in my opinion, will have similarly well-worded product descriptions. They'll have similarly high-quality photos that have been all cut out of their background and on their proper resolution, that the AI will determine, which product to show in terms of another product, or a particular variant color to show to a user versus another variant color. All of those decisions will be AI, and the rest will be up to people. And I think that right now, we're, I think, at a particular time in product management and even in e-commerce, where it's data, and we kind of look down on people that make their decisions with their guts, and because we don't make decisions well with our guts. And I agree, humans are biased inherently, no matter how unbiased we think we are. So if we're making a decision just with our gut, we're going to make biased decisions. But I think the data component will go to AI, and that will then inform a team to then make a human decision about a particular type of service or how to provide that service. And I think that that's going to be the role of AI, in my opinion, in e-commerce. But I think that as that happens, that's fantastic. It's going to open up our hearts and our minds to really figure out how to be that hospitable host to our to the person who's come into our store. They're essentially our guests for that period of time, and how do we make them leave happy so they want to come back again and again and again and again? And AI won't be able to do that.
What's the biggest takeaway you want listeners to hear today when thinking about product management?
That's a good question. So I think that the first thing is to understand at the heart of it what product management is. Even people in the tech industry talk to them sometimes, they don't know what the role of the PM is, and also because they've worked at companies where the role of the PM has been shifting in different things. I think the most important thing is to remember that you are solving a particular user's problem. That whether you have an e-commerce website or you're building some particular software that's integrating, like even, let's say, Duoplane, at the end of the day, there's a user on that other side that's having to interact with your interface, that's having to interact with your team, that's going to get a particular outcome from using your product. And that product, whether it be your e-commerce store, or your entertainment film software, or your integration software, whatever it might be, that the user should always be dead center and always remember the problem you're trying to solve. The rest of it is just, you could put your own spin on it. You could take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And make sure you understand that and don't get distracted by all the other noise in the room. I think that's the most important thing. And that's been, I think, what's allowed me to have continuous success in my businesses, is that I always look to see who are my users, why are they here, and how can I make them leave happy? And that's it. Pretty much that simple.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for joining us today. We have a PDF that he actually has, generously donated to us that we can share with you that'll go over a lot of product management frameworks for you. So we'll definitely be putting that on our website. As always, you can check out Duoplane at duoplane.com, and you can find us and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll catch you next time on the Duoplane podcast.